Hello, friends, and welcome back. We are in episode 2 of the Oscars Project, the the series where we started on 1960, the Best Picture, and we are going up into current day someday. We'll make it there. So 1961 is West Side Story, and we will be talking about that movie. And here with Jarrod. Jarrod, how you doing?
I'm doing good, and West Side Story. Interesting. I never saw the original. I saw the recent Spielberg version of this on the Disney Channel, and so it was interesting going back to the original here. See some of the differences. It was a couple of years ago I saw the Spielberg one, so I know it's not that fresh in my mind, but and of course we all read the original in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
That this is how this is, I think, based on, and so it was all there. This one had that older movie feel that I was a little wary of when we were going to watch The Apartment last week, and that I was very pleasantly surprised that we didn't get with The Apartment. But this one definitely showed its age, I think.
Yeah, we'll get into. Are you a fan of musicals?
I've enjoyed some. So it has been, I'm not huge on, they're not like my go-to type of movie. But I have enjoyed, I really like Chicago. I thought that was great. I watched La La Land. I thought that was great. I can't say I've seen a ton of the old ones from the 40s and 50s. Like White Christmas is a classic. So I think I take them and leave them as I do any other genre of movies.
Yeah. So I will. Yeah. There's a few things you mentioned. Age. So, well, first the story itself, I thought, like you mentioned, clearly inspired by Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. There's also some. I'm not a music expert, but I felt like some of the music was also inspired by Wizard of Oz. Some of the music and some of the score, not beat for beat, but it just felt like there was some inspiration there. That there was that it was inspired by that. A couple of there was a the story itself. It's a musical, so there's not a ton of dialogue. It's more through the music and the performances and the amount of time they must have spent writing the music and performing and practicing and getting all the dances right, and that must have been a ton of time. And to find people talented enough to do it, and all the people involved, or the extras, there's a ton of people involved in it. So while there's not a ton of story, it is impressive to see the spectacle, the performances, the whole production was pretty impressive.
Yeah. I think the music was by Leonard Bernstein, very well known composer, and you're right. The choreography was top notch. It really was. What I found amusing was when the movie opens, you have this kind of, I didn't like it. It was kind of this crappy color changing image,
Oh yeah.
that was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like just a simplistic outline of the city, and it was while the music was playing and the credits were rolling, and you're seeing this image, and I was just like, wow, they couldn't have put a better image. It was supposed to be abstract, and I get that, but the music itself in the beginning was a classic overture, that really had all the thematical points that the music in the whole film was going to make. All the music of the whole film was represented in that beginning overture in true classical music fashion, and really beautiful music. If you're a fan of Bernstein and classical music, it really is top notch stuff.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I thought something was wrong with my disc when I first started it, and the first image I thought it was stuck or frozen, and that's also pretty close to the image during the intermission, right? Because there's an intermission, and I think it's a similar kind of background. But yeah, I was also kind of, I don't know if it's been remastered, but the colors I was pretty impressed with considering don't know how many it was very vibrant in colors, and we'll get to colors again later, I'm sure, but it was very vibrant colors.
Yeah, I didn't know if this was just, yeah, like you said, I'm not sure if this was remastered in, it used to be in Technicolor and now it's digital or what have you. I have no idea, but yeah, but the whole the set decoration was fantastic. It was very well done. Like you said, very vibrant colors. I really like once we got through the beginning with the overture and all that stuff, I really liked the reveal, the overhead shot of the city that really emphasized sharp lines and very linear. The blocks of the city were very laid out, and it was emphasizing squares and rectangles and circles. It was very, you could really see the shapes of the city and how everything was in line, in its place, so to speak. And that's kind of ties into the theme of the story, that people are in their place, and going outside of those boundaries is a asking for conflict. And that's what happens when these two characters go outside their place, their boundary, and they interact.
I guess you could also say, I didn't think of this until you mentioned it, but it could also be almost like a cage or a prison with the straight lines and the like bars, and
Yeah.
the city is almost like a character in and of itself. It's like a looming presence throughout the film.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and they did a great job of portraying that on camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't waste any time getting into the story, right? The kind of the gangs and the kids, the teenagers, and it's funny how we see the older adults who have kind of outgrown their working. I don't have time for that nonsense. I'm here. I have to get this job done or whatever. So it's funny how they have that. The younger kids are still involved in this kind of gang war, neighborhood kind of back and forth, and the older that they get, the less they're interested in that kind of thing. They're just, I have a job to do, so I have more important things to worry about.
Yeah, and it's you get your Jets versus your Sharks, which is basically your Montagues and Capulets, and
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and it starts off, like you said, right away with this frantic action dance sequence. That's what really drew me in, was that action, the dance sequence that they started with, because it was very action oriented. There was a lot of movement, like fast movement of the people, and the camera following them, and like we said, the choreography must have been nuts for that. For that whole sequence in the beginning there, with all the dance and the even just the basketball stuff, and then how they got into that sequence was quite impressive as far as that stuff goes.
Yeah, the a lot is done through a lot of the action and fights. How they incorporate that into the choreography. It's pretty neat. The different scenes of different battle scenes, and we get
Yeah,
that later on with when people get stabbed and it gets real. And I
yeah,
think that's also it. You know the and that, I think that's part of what's tragic is that the older the older characters who are not interested with Tony not being interested in he just like, no, I have a job to do. I don't have time for that. And then he's actually gets wrapped into the mess, and he ends up being killed. So I think that's part of the tragedy is he's just someone who is trying to do the right things, and he just kind of gets wrapped up in this nonsense when he, was trying to stop things.
yeah, yeah. You get this sense of, he's transitioning to that adult world where the adults don't have time for this nonsense, and they won't let him. He tries to get out basically, and they drag him back in,
Yeah.
and yeah. So that's a good point, and that's another. It's yet another cage he was trying to get out of, and then and that was even before he met Maria, and then of course he tries to get out of it in another way with Maria, um, and so yeah, that just fits into the whole theme they were trying to do that. Yeah.
Also, some pretty heavy topics they get into with immigration and
Mm-hmm.
different cultures, and you know, adapt or coming in and into a place like into a different city and trying to kind of integrate into the city and feeling like you're being ignored, you're not appreciated, that you're less than because of the way that you're treated. And that's see some parallels to that today. Still, I mean that's still a discussion that happens today. But I thought they they tackled that in a way that it fit with the story too. But I was surprised with some of the. I mean, I know we talk a lot about science fiction as we're going through the years of science fiction, and we're trying not to judge things based on when they were made because what was made 50 or 60 years ago is going to be a lot different than what's made today. So try not to go back and use a 2024, 2025 lens as something made in 1961. But because I think we're so used to not hearing certain words, I think it's jarring for us to kind of to hear certain words being used casually. So I think we've our brains have adapted with the current climate, and we're just not used to hearing certain words anymore, certain slang terms. So it was like, whoa, they really said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, it's funny that this came out in '61, but those some of those slang terms were still in prominent use in the '80s when I was growing up,
That's
'70s and
very true.
'80s, and so it's definitely more recent drop off in usage that I've seen, um, and then of course this is dealing specifically with the Puerto Rican immigrant population in New York City at the time, which was a significant, quite a large amount um, during that time, and it was interesting seeing the discussions between that culture and the people in that culture, between Maria um, and her brother and his girlfriend, or were they married? I don't remember if I think it was just his girlfriend, but it was interesting seeing the discussion between them and how they were uh, comparing their life in New York to their life in Puerto Rico, and one was arguing for, one against. They had that in a kind of a back and forth in the song there, and so they really, they really kind of tackled that subject for that population at the time. You could easily see that probably repeated in other immigrant societies at different times during our history.
Hmm.
It's a common theme, and it's a common uh, thing for immigrants to talk about whether or not their life is better here now than it was where they came from, and very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely, and also the we talked a little bit about Shakespeare or Romeo and Juliet, but another film that came later, I think in the late '70s, was Grease, and I felt like there were some scenes and wardrobes and some of the performances that were Grease was heavily inspired. I'm sure a lot of musicals were heavily inspired by this because this is a one of the most well known
Yeah,
musicals. But Grease, it's looking back now, it's like, oh yeah, I see you, Grease. Like it's I don't think that's normal, not a knock on Grease, but it's amazing how you can see how a film can be so influential that it inspires a whole generations of other movies.
yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about Grease, but now that I do, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty close to a lot of the stuff they did in this movie. Um, Grease was the updated version, I guess, for the time period, um, and it's kind of interesting to think that it's kind of a cult classic now. Uh, Grease is, and this is considered West Side Story, of course, is a classic. It's a Oscar winning classic. So that's a interesting comparison. And one of the things I noticed when they weren't doing a number, um, either song or dance, the acting was like purposely overacted almost
Hmm.
at times. It was very um, in your face, and I wonder if that's because it was. I don't know if this was a play first that Bernstein had done the music for or written, but it definitely seemed it had that sort of stage direction acting that you would see on a stage for a play, rather than some of the movie acting that's a little more subtle that we that you saw in The Apartment, for example. Um, and that just kind of stood out to me right off the bat.
Well, this I believe this started off as a Broadway musical, right? So maybe
Right.
that's why maybe
Yeah.
that's why they wanted the same, I guess, feel. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they went for the same kind of overacting and kind of going for it to have kind of the same feel like you were seeing a musical or a Broadway musical on screen. Maybe that's like they
Yeah,
wanted that same experience.
that's probably what it was. I don't mean it's not a knock on the actors who are playing the parts. When I say overacting, they were purposely doing that
Right.
for a reason,
Yeah.
and it's just something that stood out to me like right away.
Yeah, that's something I noticed too, and I thought maybe they wanted the same. Like you said, it was intentional. I think
Yeah.
they wanted. Maybe one of the reasons was they wanted the same kind of the same feel of seeing a Broadway musical, and I'm not sure how many people saw the musical on Broadway, but maybe they wanted the same kind of feel for it. The overacting,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and that's what I felt like I was getting,
yeah,
and they pulled it off.
yeah, oh yeah. There was so as far as the cast goes. Now I'm sure in 1961 it was hard to find, maybe harder to find a cast that maybe they wanted to go with names that were more well known, but we talked about the colors and the tones, and there's a lot of brown face.
Oh, I know.
There's a lot of it.
There is.
It's like,
It's
and once you realize it, because at first I didn't really notice it,
I
and then
noticed
after
it
a while
right
you can kind
away.
of see the kind of the cake on
Yeah,
everyone's face and a few faces, and it's like that. I don't think that person's. I
yeah.
don't think Maria is Maria in real life.
That was
but
some heavy makeup going on in this film.
yeah, yeah, some of the accents,
Yeah.
and once you notice it, you start to notice the accents are, they come and go sometimes, and so, but again, I'm not going to go back and criticize a movie from 1961. It is what it is, but it is interesting to go back and see how much that kind of thing went on.
Yeah, that's probably the most dated aspect of the
Yeah,
film right
yeah,
there. Because the story itself, it's like that's eternal. I think the story itself, and slang words come and go, you know, with the times, but that the the makeup was just a little too much for the
yeah.
for but yeah, that's what they did. And yeah, it's kind of funny because I was just listening to a podcast earlier today on the radio, and it was a American Indian native who was casting actors for a play for a story that dealt with Native American Indians, around the Thanksgiving periods. And her quest was to find American Native actors on purpose because this play had so many white people filling in for Native Americans throughout its previous runs. And so it was an interesting conversation. And she said the biggest problem is that most playhouses, they don't purposely go out of their way to look. They just look at the sheets of people they have normally or easy access to, and they cast based upon what they typically have, and they don't go out of their way to look. And if they did, they might find more diversity out there. And so she goes into these playhouses and she says, I have a spreadsheet for you. There you go. Now you have access, and so she's trying to change that practice, just make people more aware and change the practice. And I have a feeling that for the movie industry during early 1960s, they probably had the same idea. I bet you if a lot of them actually were aware and had the access, they probably would have searched a little more for actors who are actually of that lineage and would play that role. But they probably it just wasn't in their purview, and so you get the heavy makeup that we see in this film.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of makeup, but I mean, I thought everyone did a really good job with the performances and the choreography and everything. I mean, obviously, it's a classic, so you can't. I'm not gonna, it's not like anyone did a bad job. It's just I was impressed with how well everyone did do.
Yeah, no, the acting itself was great. It was top notch. The dancing was just out of this world. It was the choreography, the dancing and stuff. That was just really fantastic stuff. If you like dance at all, they did a fantastic job. I don't know. I never knew much about Natalie Wood. She played Maria in this film. Other than I heard about her tragic death at one point. But that was all I knew her for, unfortunately.
She died young too. She did, I think she was 43 or 44. So yeah, she died
she
really
wasn't
young.
Yeah, wasn't that old at all. And and so that was but I knew she had been in some classic films, from the 60s or what have you. So so this was the first one I really noticed that, that's Natalie Wood. Okay, that's who she is. And she was pretty young in this film. And so great job. And all the other people did a really great job.
Yeah, she was born in 1938, so she was probably what, 22, 21, 22?
Yeah, yeah,
This one.
yeah, and and that's that's funny. That's another point. Is all these? I would guarantee you, every single one of these people playing teenagers were in their 20s or more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, they were, I'm sure.
yeah, but
There's a few faces that were, recognizable, that couldn't quite place, that seen him in other things, but even Tony, his face looks familiar. He's from other things
it
that
did, yeah,
I've seen at some point, but
yeah, yeah. One of the nice parts they did was when Tony and Maria first meet. They meet through this filtered, unrealistic lens.
yeah.
Everything was kind of it was they were definitely in some kind of like fantasy land when they were first meeting there, and the rest of the world just kind of melted away into this weird blackness or what have you, and I thought that was really cool how they did that for the time, because it really emphasized that these two were star-crossed lovers. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't meeting on any plane of reality of what was going to happen if they actually tried to get together. And I like how that filter that they was seeing them through really emphasized that. Thought it was well done.
Yeah, I thought that was a good scene too, of just getting lost in the moment, and you don't like you exist with, you're not quite you're in a different world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good stuff.
And we talked a lot about about the immigrants, the experience of the people immigrating to New York City at the time and fitting in and wondering if their lives are better. I thought at the end it does kind of explore that cycle of violence and I know it's tied into Romeo and Juliet, but I think it did that too. Is there's this violent act and the other side uh, retaliates, and it just this endless cycle of violence. So I thought that was another thing that I was kind of surprised that it got so. I shouldn't have been, because it's Romeo and Juliet. It's heavily inspired by Romeo and Juliet, but I was surprised that it went there with the death.
Yeah, and that was actually reflected in some of the earlier songs. A lot of the songs were pointing out these circular problems of society and how these things just keep coming back around. And like you mentioned, the circle of violence, but it was also, that was one of the themes running through the whole film, was that circular nature. And it wasn't like violence, and also the problems of immigration and integration and racism, and those kind of circular problems that just keep coming back and keep coming around. And I love how the lieutenant, the policeman, points out, as much as we don't like him at some points in the film, when he's talking to them in the soda shop, he points out to both of them that, where are your parents from? And where are your parents from? And that you're all immigrants, and that this circle is still going. When the white kids were immigrants, when their families were immigrants, they were getting the same treatment. And so it's just this thing that keeps happening, and the violence keeps happening, as we saw at the end of the film.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought Maria would die too. I thought something would happen, that she would, Romeo and Juliet, but I thought she was going to somehow meet her end, but she managed to survive.
Yeah. They didn't quite copy Romeo and Juliet exactly, but
Yeah.
but yeah. It It was, yeah, it's pretty good. You know what's funny is one of the questions I had when Maria asked Tony to go and stop what was only supposed to be a fist fight between two people, and she was very vehement about him stopping that. And I was just like, why? Why is she so like? What is? It's just two guys in a fist fight, you know. And of course, you knew as soon as he got there, it was going to be way worse than a
Yeah.
fist fight, you know. And I was like, what could Tony have done? Because he didn't have any luck talking to these guys earlier in the film at all, you know. His side just wants him to be there because he's a good fighter, and they want him to lead in that violent example, and he's trying to talk him out of it, and he's never had any luck at that. And
No.
and the and the other side hates him because he's seeing Maria. So what
Yeah.
is he gonna do? And I was just like, why does she want that so bad?
Yeah, I don't know if it would have escalated anyway, because they did bring knives, so they were ready for it to escalate. I don't know if it would have if just the two had fought, the two quote unquote best had fought, and maybe it would be over. But yeah, it's just this. I think that adds to the tragedy of the whole story is Tony just trying to do the right thing and just trying to
Yeah,
stop two guys from fighting that ends up being multiple people being killed. So
yeah. Yeah, it just made me think like, well, if she didn't talk him into going to that, he was like quite willing to just let them, hack it out or whatever. And what would have happened if he didn't go? Would they have ran off together? Or would somebody have came back and killed him later? Who knows? But
yeah, you never know what could have happened. But especially the scene before or a little bit before the fight with Tony Maria, that was very Shakespearean. That when she's on the stairwell and Tony comes up and meets her at a window, and that was kind of neat just to see that.
yeah, yeah, that was interesting. Yeah. Uh, and then they had that scene where they were taking those vows in that I forget where it was. Was it in like the attic,
Wardrobe
at some
shop.
attic or something like that, or whatever? But they were under this. The lighting was set so that there was this almost halo of light above them, and then the window had like a little cross in it and stuff, and it was a very nice, very well framed shot, and I found that just there were a lot of nice shots like that in the film that really stood out at points.
Yeah, you mentioned the shots and the framing. And we've talked about the choreography. Being a camera person in a movie like this can't be easy either because of all the different movements. You have to get the flow of it right and be in the right position. So all the people working the cameras, I'm sure at the time was several people. But that's another aspect that I think most people overlook is to get the perfect shot because they can perform it, but if you're not in the right place to film it, then it doesn't matter. So
Yeah,
that's another. People behind the scenes play a big part in these types of films looking as good as they do because of all the work that goes in that no one really notices of faces and people that we don't really hear about. So yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, I'm sure other people involved. I'm sure there was hundreds of people involved. So it's really impressive.
yeah, that's the thankless work that you don't see.
Yeah.
Because if you're noticing camera work too much, then they're overdoing it and they're not doing it properly. Um, and if you're, so when it's done right, you really got to know what you're looking for in order to notice it and appreciate it for what it is. Uh, they set up there was a lot of dolly, what I call dolly movement in this film to follow the choreography of the gangs running around in the yards and what have you. Um, and so there's a lot of dolly movement, and that dolly movement has to be pretty precise as it's moving along with all these actors and trying to get the shot they want, and along with the choreography of the actors having to face in the proper direction at the right time, which is a timing thing on the choreographer's part. You also have to have the cameras in the right place at the right time, which is a cinematography thing. And cinematography doesn't get, it gets a lot of credit, but not near enough as it should. It's really top of the line skill that you have to pull this stuff off with.
Yeah, a lot of a lot of moving parts to make something like this look as good as it does, to make it look seamless. Like you said, if it's too much, then you notice it. If it's not enough, you notice it. Has to be just right.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's probably some of the criteria used to judge these films when they're trying to figure out what is the best picture of the year, is how obvious is it that somebody's filming a movie, or am I so sucked in that I don't notice that I'm watching, that I'm seeing a camera filming a movie, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love I love how they I love that one scene where they kind of scatter like roaches whenever they hear the sirens coming in the background. And they're like crawling over fences and stuff like that. They look like a bunch of insects.
You did a pretty good job climbing that fence. It's a gigantic fence. So I was like,
I know.
wow, it's pretty good.
Wonder if they did their own stunts.
I don't know. Did you notice that there, and this is a nitpick, so I know it's going to sound bad, but there were some times when their lips weren't quite synced up. So I don't think they were singing and performing. I think they probably performed it, and well, for sound reasons, I'm sure, is they probably performed it in a studio, and then they kind of lip synced or sung along during the dances. But there's a couple of times when the lips are a little bit off. Mm-hmm. But again, it's not going to be perfect in something like that.
Yeah, that's another tough thing to pull off. That's and that has to do with another usually underappreciated skill is editing. Yeah. Editors don't get near enough credit that they should on movies, because if you're thinking about the editing, then that's a problem. And so you never think about editing, and that means they did it right. And so yeah, that's really tough. I can't even imagine doing it back then when you didn't have digital. Like, it's hard enough with digital, never mind with actual whatever size film they use for this, 8mm, whatever it is, but I think it's 35mm. I forget what the terminology is there, but I can't even imagine editing the sound into that and having it be exact the whole way through the film, especially with singing and music like that. That's another huge skill to have.
It's a great point. I think we take for granted sometimes how much work digital saves. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot different when you're using a mouse and keyboard or versus, I don't know how they edited with scissors and tape with physical film. So yeah, it's a ton of work. So
yeah,
it makes these older films even more impressive, considering all the work that goes into it from top to bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of our younger kids these days don't even realize where the term "left on the cutting room floor" comes from. Yeah. And it was actual piles of film they had to cut out.
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
And then syncing all that up together, lining up if you have different cameras filming the same scene and you want to switch camera angle, I mean, that must have been,
Yep.
that must have been tough.
Yeah. And that's as far as film history goes, when digital started to make a real impact on Hollywood, you started to see a lot more of fast cutting away of scenes and fast, switching from face to face, or switching from action to action, or what have you. Whereas films like this, you'll see a lot of long scenes where the actors are doing a lot of stuff before you ever get to an actual cut. And there's a reason for that, just because it was better for them to take 3 days to build a set, plan out the scene, choreograph it, practice it, and then get it all in one shot when everything was ready, than it was to say, all right, everybody get together, we'll just shoot a whole bunch of stuff and edit it later.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that back then.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty wild when you think about it. I mean, what you do on your YouTube channel, just imagine doing that with film, with your editing, and just even, I mean, technology is wild. How far we've come.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And just to stick with the Romeo and Juliet thing, of course, there was no actual vial of poison here.
Mm-hmm.
That they were taking, but the thing that was poisonous to Tony was the rumor of Maria's death.
Oh.
That was his poison, because when he heard that and he believed it, that's when he went, and that's when he got himself killed. And so that
Interesting.
That was kind of like the poison for Tony right there. And then of course he dies. We find out she's alive, and that works out just like Romeo and Juliet, except she doesn't kill herself. But
Yeah.
but I thought that was interesting how that they worked that angle into the story.
Yeah, it ended on a pretty dark note too. It's not a very happy ending.
No, a little grim. Yeah. Yeah. My wife didn't want to see it because she knew the ending. So.
Yeah. Yeah. But the all the. I'm not the biggest musical fan, but really impressive though.
Yeah. No, I was a little trepidatious coming into it, but and right off the bat, I didn't like the opening image, and so it was like, okay, what am I getting into here? But it won me over, as it went on, as I saw some of the just a masterful work that went into it, and what these people were able to pull off with this film.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I don't know what this won over as far as who was competing with it for Best Picture.
Let's see.
Because I know last week we saw that The Apartment beat out some heavy hitters.
Let's see. Best Picture was up against Fanny, The Guns of Navarone, The Hustler, and Judgment at Nuremberg.
I've seen none of those, so I don't know.
Yeah. They also won. Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins also won Best Director.
I could see that.
for this one. Best Supporting Actress, Rita Moreno
Oh,
as
okay.
Anita won. Best Supporting Actor was Bernardo. George Carcass. Good, sorry, George, mispronounced your name. Uh, yeah, but surprisingly, it didn't win Best Song.
No kidding.
Yeah, but it did win Best Scoring of a Musical, obviously,
Sure.
and won Best Sound, Best Art Direction for color, Best Cinematography,
Yeah.
Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing.
Ah, sure. Yeah. I could see all
So
that,
that's
definitely.
cleaned up pretty good.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, good stuff. Anything else on your list?
Nope. I think we got everything.
Yeah, so the next one, as we venture into 1962, next up is Lawrence of Arabia.
Nice. I've seen
I've
that one
never seen that
before,
one.
and I enjoyed it.
Hmm.
So, it's been a while, so I'll be looking forward to seeing that again.
Yeah, it'll be a first watch for me, so
Good.
it'll
Cool.
be fun. And after Lawrence of Arabia, we'll go into Tom Jones.
Never saw that
Yeah, never saw that one either, so it'll be fun. Well, cool. So until next time, Jared, where can people find you?
one. You can find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and you can find me on podcast Speculative Speculations and other fine podcasts on page chewing just like this one.
Nice. Yeah, and find me on pagestream.com. I'm easy. So until next time, we'll talk to everyone very soon.